When your neighbor slips you a note saying, "Get out of here if you want to live," you don't wait for explanations, you run, or you freeze. I did both. Oh honey, let me tell you something, life has a funny way of throwing warnings at you. Some come whispered, some shouted, and some, scribbled on a piece of paper shoved under your door at 6 in the morning. And when you read a message that sounds like it came straight out of a thriller movie, your heart doesn't just beat, it packs its little suitcase and prepares to jump out of your chest. But the real story isn't the note. It's what happened 10 minutes later. And how one moment of courage, one neighbor's desperate warning, and one wild twist changed everything. So sit tight, grab a glass of iced tea, and let Auntie May walk you through this roller coaster of survival, instinct, and neighborly miracles. When I first saw that note on the floor right inside my doorway, I felt the kind of chill that does not come from the morning air but from something deeper and heavier that sinks into your bones. The letters were shaky, the ink was a little smudged, and the whole message felt rushed, like the writer had barely enough time to get the warning to me before something dangerous pressed in on them. The message said, "Get out of here if you want to live," and every part of me wanted to believe that it was some sort of odd prank or maybe a misunderstanding. But sometimes life whispers before it screams, and the whisper that morning felt sharp enough to cut through my doubt. I held the note with both hands and I could feel my heart thudding like it was trying to get out of my chest before I did. I tried to tell myself that it was silly to be scared over a few words on a piece of paper. Still, my body felt tense, as though something invisible in the house had shifted. I had lived in that home for years and I knew every sound, every creak, every harmless echo that came from walls getting older. Yet that morning the silence felt wrong. Not peaceful, not quiet, but heavy. Like something was waiting. The strange thing about warnings is that they rarely come when you feel ready. They come when you are half awake with messy hair, wearing mismatched socks, and thinking more about your first sip of coffee than any life or death situation. I stood there with that paper in my hand and my mind tried to reason its way out of fear. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was for someone else. Maybe the neighbor had written it after watching some late-night survival movie and he had lost track of reality for a moment. My mind lined up excuses because excuses felt safe. They felt familiar. They felt normal. But my gut would not let me settle into that comfort. The truth is this: when life throws danger toward you, the first message often arrives softly. A feeling, a whisper, a small sign, a nudge that makes no sense but refuses to be ignored. And that morning that note was exactly that. A nudge from something unseen telling me that staying still could cost me something far greater than pride or embarrassment. It could cost me my life. My hands were shaking, but I pretended they were not. I placed the note on the counter and tried to breathe slowly. I looked toward the window, trying to figure out whether something outside was off. The street looked quiet in the early light. The sky was pale and tender with the start of dawn. Birds were beginning their morning calls. A delivery truck rumbled far down the block. Ordinary things. Safe things. Yet I could not shake the sense that the world outside looked normal only because it had not yet caught up with whatever was creeping toward my home. My neighbor Mr. Daniels, the man who had written the note, was not the type to start trouble. He did not gossip. He did not exaggerate. He lived a very simple life, and he moved with the slow, purposeful energy of a man who had lived long enough to know that peace was precious. If a man like that wrote a warning, it was not for fun. It was because something real, something frightening, something urgent had driven him to do it. The hardest part was trusting something that felt so strange. I stood still for a long moment, waiting, hoping that some extra detail would drop into my mind and explain everything. But life does not work that way. Life does not announce danger with a siren or a flashing sign. Sometimes all you get is a few hurried words and a gut feeling that does not let your feet stay still. I thought about ignoring the note. I truly did. I thought about making breakfast like it was any other morning. I thought about calling Mr. Daniels and asking why he would write something so dramatic. But then I imagined him not answering, or answering with a voice so shaken that I would instantly regret every second I wasted. And that image pushed me closer to a decision that felt ridiculous and necessary all at once. I stepped away from the counter and listened to the house. I never realized how loud your own heartbeat can sound until you are trying to hear something else. I tried to find a clue in the air. A shift in the floorboards. A whisper of wind through a crack. Something. Anything. But all I heard was my own breathing and the terrifying truth that I had to choose what happened next. Trust the warning you were not expecting. Those words are easy to say when danger is only a story or a movie or something that happens to someone else. But when you are the one standing alone with a piece of paper that tells you to leave if you want to live, suddenly every choice feels heavier. Every second feels longer. Every doubt feels louder. Yet at the same time something stronger began to grow inside me. A sense that if I did nothing I would regret it forever. I had ignored intuition before and it never ended well. And this time intuition was not whispering softly. It was pounding on the door of my mind, telling me that hesitation could be fatal. So I made myself face the truth. That note was not random. It was not meaningless. It was not some dramatic overreaction. It was a message from someone who knew something I did not. Someone who cared enough to warn me before it was too late. And sometimes all you need is to trust that thin thread of belief that connects you to safety even when you cannot yet see the danger. I picked up my coat with hands that still trembled and I stepped toward the door. I looked back once at my quiet home and I felt a strange ache in my chest. I did not know if I was leaving for a few hours or forever. I only knew that staying was not an option. Not after that warning. Not after that feeling. Trusting a message that feels ridiculous is not easy. Trusting a warning you never asked for is even harder. But that morning taught me something powerful. Sometimes survival begins the moment you stop arguing with your instincts and start listening to them. And that was the moment I walked out of my house, knowing without understanding that something dangerous was only minutes away. Fear is a strange thing because it enters your body quietly yet echoes through every part of you. When I stepped outside that morning, fear did not roar at me. It whispered. It trembled. It clung to my ribs and wrapped itself around my breath. I wanted to pretend that I was strong and steady, but the truth is that my legs felt weak and my heartbeat felt louder than the early morning birds. Fear makes you feel small and heavy all at once. It lives in the space between what you know and what you fear you might soon discover. And that space was closing in fast. I had barely taken 3 steps from my doorway when the air shifted around me. It was not a sound or a shadow or a movement. It was simply a feeling that something dangerous lurked close enough to taste yet far enough that I could not see it. Fear is not the enemy though. Freezing is. And that was the battle I faced in that moment. My body wanted to lock itself in place like a statue while my mind shouted, move, move, move. But moving when your entire body is trembling is like trying to walk on legs that do not feel like they belong to you. I forced myself to take one step and then the next. Each one felt heavier and more important than the last. I wanted to walk calmly as though nothing unusual was happening, but my breath kept skipping too fast and too shallow. Fear presses on your chest like an invisible hand. It makes the world feel tilted and unfamiliar. The quiet neighborhood that usually felt safe now looked like a stage set for something dark. The houses looked too still and the windows looked like eyes watching me. Even the light of dawn felt pale and fragile, as though it too was afraid of what lurked in the corners where the sun had not reached yet. I tried to steady myself by whispering small reminders inside my head. You were alive. You were moving. You were listening. You were choosing to survive. But fear kept trying to pull me backward. I could feel it tugging at the edges of my thoughts, saying stop, think, hesitate. That soft hesitation is the real danger because it steals your precious seconds. It wraps itself around your ankles and keeps you stuck even while your instincts scream at you to run. I knew that if I froze, then everything the note warned me about might reach me before I had a chance to escape. I kept moving and my senses sharpened in ways I did not expect. Every sound felt louder. Every shift in the wind felt like a sign. Every shadow felt like it might rise up and reveal something I did not want to see. I was not imagining things. I was preparing for them. That is what fear does. It makes you pay attention. It makes you tune into the world with a clarity you never appreciate during peaceful days. I suddenly remembered stories I had heard from other people. Stories where they had felt something was wrong yet convinced themselves to stay calm and ended up suffering because they listened to doubt instead of instinct. I told myself that I would not be one of those stories. As I walked farther from my house, I kept turning my head slightly even though I tried not to seem frantic. My steps were uneven. My breathing was uneven, but I was still moving. And that was the important part. I tried to understand what exactly I was afraid of. Maybe it was a person. Maybe it was a situation. Maybe it was something I could not imagine. The not knowing made everything feel sharper and heavier. But I held on to one truth. Fear is not the enemy. It is a natural alarm bell. It is the thing that wakes you up and makes you aware. Freezing is the enemy because freezing hands your life over to whatever danger is coming. I kept trying to stay focused on the path ahead, but a voice inside me whispered that something behind me was shifting. I did not turn around. I knew that if I stopped, then fear would grab hold of me like iron chains. I had to keep going. I had to get to Mr. Daniel's house, or at least close enough to understand why he sent that note. I kept thinking about the look he might have had on his face as he wrote that warning. A man like him who rarely showed emotion must have felt something powerful to deliver a message that urgent. That thought alone gave me just enough strength to keep walking. The world around me felt unreal in those moments. The grass looked too bright. The trees looked too still. The sky looked too wide. Everything felt stretched, as though time had decided to slow itself just to test my nerves. I began to realize something important. Fear does not always appear in moments of chaos. Sometimes it appears in moments of stillness, because stillness allows your mind to fill the space with every possibility. And when the possibilities are dark, your body reacts before your thoughts can make sense of anything. My hands were cold even though the morning air was mild. My mouth felt dry. My pulse felt like a drum. But I kept pushing myself forward. I remembered something a teacher once told me. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to move even while fear walks beside you. That idea became a little light inside my mind, guiding me step by step. I could feel the weight of the note inside my pocket. It felt like a burning truth pressing against my leg. Get out of here if you want to live. Every word echoed inside me with each breath I took. I told myself that freezing would betray the person who warned me. It would waste their effort. It would ignore their urgency. And I refused to let fear choose the ending of this moment. I would choose it instead. I walked until I could see the edge of the Daniels' porch, and my body finally loosened slightly. Not fully, but enough to breathe without shaking. And as I got closer, I realized that the only reason I had made it that far was because I kept moving even when everything inside me wanted to collapse. Fear did not save me. My movement did. My decision did. That one choice to push through the trembling and to keep going is what kept me alive that morning. I remember standing there in the middle of my quiet kitchen, feeling the kind of silence that hums so loudly it almost hurts your ears. When danger is close, you feel it deep in your bones even when you do not want to believe it. And that morning I felt something strange pulling at me like a cold hand on my back. My neighbor's warning kept repeating in my mind, get out of here if you want to live. It did not make sense at first. Everything seemed normal. The sunlight was creeping through the curtains like it always did. The kettle was whistling on the stove. The world looked the same. But something inside me whispered, listen. Pay attention. Nothing is normal today. So I grabbed my phone, walked to the window, and took a long, careful look at the street. It was too still. Not the usual morning movement. No dogs barking, no cars passing, no kids arguing on their way to school. It felt like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. And that is when I realized that my neighbor had not written that warning for fun or drama or panic. He was not the type to joke about danger. He was the quiet kind, the steady kind, the kind who did not speak unless he needed to. If he told me to get out, then something was real and something was wrong. I stepped back from the window, feeling my heartbeat climbing higher with every second. My mind raced, trying to connect pieces that were not fitting together. Why would he warn me? Why would he not knock on my door? Why write a message? Why slip it under the door? I replayed our last conversation from 2 days earlier. He had seemed worried and distracted, like his thoughts were far away. He asked me if I had seen anything unusual around the neighborhood. At the time I laughed it off. I told him everything here is too boring to be unusual. But now those words felt heavy, foolish, and far too confident. I walked around my house slowly, trying not to make noise even though I knew that was silly. I checked every room, not for people but for clues. Something, anything that would explain the warning. My breathing was loud in my own ears. My steps felt like hammer strikes on the floor. I felt watched even though no one was there. And when fear rises in you like that, every shadow looks alive and every sound feels like a threat. In the living room I noticed something unusual. A picture frame on the shelf was slightly pushed forward. I had straightened it the day before. I am particular about small things like that. And I knew I had left it perfectly aligned. So why was it sticking out? I picked it up, my hands shaking. And behind it, taped to the back, was a tiny black device with a blinking blue light so faint you would miss it unless you were looking directly at it. I stared at it, not breathing. I did not need to be a tech expert to guess what it was. That little thing was not decoration and it did not belong to me. Someone had been in my house. I felt a rush of heat travel up my neck and explode behind my eyes. There is a kind of fear that steals your breath with sharp cold fingers, and then there is the kind of fear that lights a fire in you. I felt both at once. Someone had entered my home, touched my things and planted something without my knowledge. How long had it been there? Who put it there? And why? Those questions spun through my mind like a tornado refusing to settle. I looked around the room again, feeling exposed. If one device was here, could there be more? I lifted cushions, checked behind furniture and opened drawers. And yes, there were more. 2 more devices, one behind the TV and another under the corner of the rug near the door. I stood there staring at them, trying to make sense of the situation. My neighbor must have known something. He must have seen someone enter or leave my house. That was the only explanation. And if he thought I was in danger, then the danger had to be real, immediate and lethal. Suddenly the air felt too heavy to breathe. My pulse was loud, fast and uneven. I backed up toward the kitchen, trying to calm my mind. But then I noticed something else. The back door was not fully latched. I always lock it. Always. Habit. Routine. Safety. But it was slightly open. Not wide, but just enough to tell me it had been touched. That was the final confirmation. Someone had been inside while I was sleeping. Someone had moved through my home like it was theirs, leaving behind little pieces of a threat that was growing by the second. My legs felt weak, as if the floor was shifting beneath me, but I forced myself to stay focused. Panic is a luxury you cannot afford when danger is near. So I took a breath and tried to think like a person who wanted to survive. I remembered my neighbor's words again. Get out if you want to live. He had not told me to call the police. He had not told me to wait. He had told me to leave. That meant the threat was not just inside the house. It was outside too. It was close. It was watching. I moved quietly toward my bedroom, grabbed a bag and shoved a few essentials inside. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. Survival has a way of sharpening every instinct you have. I turned off the lights, slipped off my shoes and walked toward the front door with soft steps. The house felt like a throat closing around me. Every second felt stretched and stretched until it nearly snapped. When I reached the door, I stopped. Something told me not to open it. I leaned closer to the peephole and my breath caught in my throat. A man was standing just outside. Not moving. Just standing there like a statue. He was facing my door directly. No expression, no fidgeting, no purpose except to wait. It was the kind of stillness that revealed intent. Dangerous intent. My skin went cold from head to toe. My neighbor's warning now echoed like thunder in my mind. 10 minutes, he had said. 10 minutes before something would happen. And now a man was waiting at my door like a predator waiting for a signal. I stepped back, my heart pounding so hard I thought the sound would give me away. I needed another exit. The back door maybe. But then I remembered it was already disturbed. If someone had come in that way once, they might be waiting there too. I tried to think even as fear clawed at me. I opened the hallway closet and there, tucked behind old coats, was a small attic access panel I had forgotten about. A narrow wooden ladder folded against the wall. It was dusty, unused, but it was a chance. Maybe the only one. I pulled it down as quietly as I could. The wood creaked softly and I froze, hoping the man outside had not heard. I waited. Silence. Good. I climbed up, pulled the panel shut above me and crouched in the small attic space, dusty, dark and tight. From here I could hear faint footsteps entering my house. Slow, careful, deliberate. Someone was inside. Someone was searching for me. And all I could do was stay silent, hope the shadows protected me and pray that my neighbor had been right about the 10 minutes. Up in that cramped, dusty attic I felt every second stretching out like a wire pulled too tight. The darkness pressed against me like a heavy blanket, and every soft creak in the floor below told me that someone was moving slowly through my home. My throat felt tight and my breath came out in small controlled puffs because even the slightest sound felt dangerous. When fear climbs inside you, it does not scream. No, it whispers. It nudges. It sharpens every sense until the beating of your own heart feels like thunder rolling through your chest. And in that moment I was more aware of my heartbeat than I had ever been in my life. I could feel the weight of the house shifting gently each time the intruder stepped from one room to another. I knew my home so well I could tell exactly where he was by the pattern of the floorboards. He was in the living room first, then the hallway, then the kitchen, and finally back near my bedroom door. He moved slowly like he knew I was there somewhere and he only needed time to find me. The silence wrapped around his footsteps, making them sound even more threatening. He was not rushing. He was not confused. He was hunting. I stayed perfectly still even though my legs were cramping and my hands were shaking. I kept thinking about my neighbor's warning written so quickly and slipped under my door like an urgent secret meant only for me. 10 minutes, he had said. Leave if you want to live. I wondered where my neighbor was now. Had he left already? Had something happened to him? Was he hiding somewhere too? The thoughts kept swirling in my mind like leaves caught in a storm. But right then questions did not matter. Only survival did. The attic air felt thick with dust and I could feel tiny particles settling on my skin. Sweat trickled down my back and soaked the collar of my shirt, but I did not dare move to wipe it away. The intruder had stopped walking. That was worse than the footsteps. Silence meant he was listening. Listening for me. Listening for the smallest hint of movement. I pressed my hand over my mouth to steady my breathing. Every instinct inside me screamed, stay still. Stay quiet. Stay alive. Then I heard a faint sound from below. A drawer sliding open. Another drawer. A cupboard door creaking. He was searching. That confirmed one thing. He was not here to steal anything. He was here for me. The realization pushed a wave of cold dread down my spine. Someone had come into my home, planted devices, left the back door unlatched, and now this man was inside, walking slowly, checking every hiding spot. Whoever he was, whatever he was after, he would not stop calmly and leave. He would not walk away thinking I was gone. He would search until he found something. Or someone. I knew the attic was not safe forever. The panel was thin and the ladder was obvious. If he looked up he would see it. If he heard any noise he would climb. I needed a plan. But planning in the dark with fear gripping your ribs is like swimming through mud. Still I tried. I forced my breath steady. I focused. There was a small loft window on the far end of the attic. Old, dusty, covered in grime. It faced the backyard. If I could get to it and push it open I might slip out onto the garage roof and climb down the side. The yard was fenced but there was a tree near the corner. I could get over it if I reached it. But that meant crawling across the attic floor slowly, quietly, and making sure the boards did not creak. The idea scared me, but staying put scared me more. I waited until I heard the man move again. He was walking toward the front door now. I heard the click of the lock and then another silence. Was he leaving? Was he waiting outside? Was he checking something? I could not tell. The uncertainty made the air feel colder. He might return any moment. This might be my only chance. I slowly shifted onto my knees, making sure not to put weight on the weakest planks. The attic groaned lightly and I froze. The footsteps stopped too. He had heard something. I stayed silent, praying he would think it was nothing. After a few long seconds I heard him move again toward the bedroom. That gave me a little time. I crawled forward, keeping my hands spread out evenly so the floor would not squeal under pressure. The loft window came into view. It was smaller than I remembered. Dust covered the glass like a fog. I touched it lightly. It felt cool. That meant outside air could reach it. Good. I pressed the frame with my fingertips, hoping it would slide without noise. It resisted at first. Old wood swollen from years of weathering. I tried again, pushing just a little harder. It gave a tiny shift and made a thin, dry scrape. I froze again. Below me the footsteps stopped once more. Silence settled like a heavy shadow. My heart hammered painfully against my ribs. Minutes dragged by. I did not dare move. Then another sound. Something small. A shuffle. A drawer maybe. A quiet grunt. He was still looking for me. That was my push. I worked the window slowly. Bit by bit. Breath by breath, it slid open just enough for me to slip through. Fresh air touched my face like a blessing from heaven. I felt hope rising inside me like warm light. I eased my legs out onto the ledge and tested the strength of the shingles on the roof. They held. I slid out slowly, gripping the frame with both hands, lowering myself onto the roof. The slope was not steep, but one wrong shift and I would fall into the yard, making enough noise to alert the intruder. I stayed low and crawled along the roof until I reached the far corner where the garage connected to the fence line. From inside the house I heard a new sound. The attic ladder creaking open. My breath caught. He had found it. He was climbing. Fear exploded inside me like a firestorm. My body moved before my thoughts did. I reached the edge of the roof, grabbed the top of the fence and swung one leg over. The wood dug into my palms and scraped my arm, but I did not stop. I slipped down the other side, landing in a crouch on soft dirt. I immediately pressed my back against the fence, staying low, listening. Above me I heard the attic panel bang open. A heavy thump followed. He was inside the attic. He was too close. If he looked around even for a few minutes, he would find that open window and he would know exactly where I had gone. I needed to move. Now. The tree near the corner of the fence rustled lightly in the morning wind. I ran toward it, keeping low, knees bent, arms close to my sides. Each movement was fueled by fear, but also by something else. Determination. A deep, sharp desire to survive. A quiet voice inside me whispered, "You are not dying today." I reached the tree, grabbed onto a low branch and pulled myself up. My muscles burned, but I kept climbing. From up there I could see the street. Empty. Still. Quiet. Too quiet. But I spotted something else. A cracked gate 2 houses down. An opening. A chance. I climbed down the other side of the tree, landing softly behind the neighbor's shed. I could hear nothing behind me but the pounding of my own heart. I began moving again, slipping through corners, staying behind hedges, following shadows like they were old friends guiding me to safety. I made it to the cracked gate, pushed it open and stepped into the alleyway beyond. Cold air hit my face, and for the first time since morning I felt like I could breathe. But I knew it was not over. Not yet. The danger had not passed. The man had not given up. Someone had sent him. Someone wanted me gone. And now that I had escaped, he would search. He would return. He would not stop. My neighbor had known something. He had tried to save me. And now I needed to understand exactly what danger I was in and who had brought it to my doorstep. But for the moment one thing mattered. I was alive. And I intended to stay that way. I kept walking through that narrow alley with my heart echoing in my ears like a drum that refused to slow down. The morning light had begun to stretch across the pavement, turning the world a soft pale gold, but I did not feel any warmth from it. I felt exposed, like the sun was a spotlight shining right on me. Every step I took felt loud, even though I moved quietly with careful steps. I did not know who else was watching or who else had been involved in whatever was happening inside my home. I only knew one thing. Someone wanted me gone, and someone sent that man. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. As I moved farther down the alley I kept close to the fences, pressing my body against the wooden panels whenever a car passed on the main road. The emptiness felt unnatural. Normally in the morning I could hear neighbors arguing or calling their kids or dragging trash bins to the curb. But today the silence felt deliberate, like someone had pressed pause on the world around me. I felt like I was moving inside a bubble where danger floated in every direction. The cracked gate behind me slowly drifted closed with a soft creak, and I flinched, turning around quickly. For a moment I thought the man might have followed me, climbing out of the attic, climbing over the fence, stepping into the alley with quiet predator-like footsteps. But no one was there. Just the empty passage stretching behind me. Still I felt watched. That feeling would not leave me. It clung to me like cold fingers on the back of my neck. I needed to find my neighbor. He was the only one who had tried to warn me. The only one who knew something. I had lived next to him for years, and though we were not close friends, he was kind, steady and observant. The kind of man who noticed things others missed. He was the kind of person who knew when a car he had never seen before was parked on the street, or when someone was walking around late at night without a purpose. If he told me to leave in 10 minutes, that meant he knew exactly when danger would arrive. That meant he must have seen something or heard something specific. And right now he was the only hope I had. His house was 2 blocks away. I knew I had to get there without being seen. I did not take the main street. Instead I moved through backyards, slipping between bushes and fences and narrow gaps left between sheds and garages. My legs shook with every step, partly from fear, partly from the exhaustion of running on adrenaline for so long. But I kept going. I forced myself forward, whispering inside my head, "You have to keep moving. You cannot stop. Not yet." When I finally reached the back of his house, I stopped behind his garage. The door was shut. The windows were dark. His car was not in the driveway. My heart tightened. Maybe he had already escaped. Maybe he had left knowing the danger would spread. Or maybe something worse had happened to him. I edged closer, staying low near the ground. The grass was damp from the morning dew and it soaked through my knees, but I did not care. I reached the back door of his house and tapped on the glass very lightly. No answer. I tried again, a little louder. Still nothing. A sinking feeling pooled in my stomach. The house felt as silent as mine had felt before I realized someone was inside it. Silence was no longer a comfort. Silence was a warning. I looked around the yard and noticed something strange. His flower pots near the porch were knocked over, the soil spilled across the concrete in dark, messy streaks. He loved those plants. He never left them thrown around. Something had happened here, something violent or rushed or frightening enough to stop him from cleaning up. I stepped onto the porch and tried the doorknob. It moved. It was unlocked. My breath caught. He never left his door unlocked. Not even for a minute. That was another sign that he had not left peacefully. I pushed the door open slowly, the hinges groaning as if they were warning me to turn back. The living room was dim and still, with faint streaks of light spilling across the floor. A mug lay shattered near the table, pieces spread out like sharp little stars. A chair was knocked over, lying on its side. Papers were scattered across the carpet. Not in a chaotic mess, but in a deliberate search pattern. Someone had been inside. Someone had been looking for something. Or looking for him. A wave of unease rolled through me. Had the same man who entered my house come here too? Had he confronted my neighbor? My pulse climbed higher just thinking about it. I whispered his name softly, unsure if I wanted an answer or feared one. No voice responded. The house remained frozen in that eerie silence. I walked farther inside, checking each room with slow steps and heightened senses. In the kitchen I saw something that made my stomach drop. A pot of coffee sat on the stove, still half full. The burner was off, but the pot was warm. That meant he had been here recently, very recently. He had made coffee. Something had happened after that. Something that forced him to leave quickly without a chance to clean anything or finish his drink. I walked into his study, and that was where I found the note. It was on the desk, tucked under a small paperweight shaped like a lighthouse. A simple piece of lined paper with handwriting that looked rushed, uneven and shaky. My breath caught as I read it. "They are coming. Leave now. Do not trust anyone, not even the ones you think you know. Go to the old cabin on Ridge Lane. I will explain everything if I can. Hurry." My hands trembled as I held the note. My neighbor had known far more than he had told me. He knew who was coming. He knew they were looking for me. He knew I needed to leave. And he knew where I should go. Ridge Lane was a few miles away, past the wooded area behind the old mill. There was an abandoned cabin there, half hidden by trees and brush. I had been there once years ago during a community cleanup project. It was remote, quiet, easy to overlook. A good place to hide. But one sentence from his note kept echoing through my mind. "Do not trust anyone, not even the ones you think you know." That kind of warning does not come from paranoia. That comes from knowledge. That comes from truth. That meant this danger was bigger than one intruder. Bigger than one strange morning. Bigger than a simple break-in. It meant someone close to me might be involved, or someone connected to my life in a deeper way. I felt anger spark inside me, mixing with the fear. I did not deserve this. I had done nothing to provoke anyone. Yet someone was trying to erase me. Someone had stepped into my home and turned my life into a nightmare. And now I had to fight to stay alive. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. I knew what I had to do. I had to get to the cabin before whoever was hunting me found me again. I had to keep moving, keep breathing, keep thinking. I could not break down. I could not freeze. Survival demanded action, not tears. I left my neighbor's house through the back door, closing it gently behind me. I stepped into the yard and took one last look at the scattered belongings and overturned furniture. I felt a quiet gratitude that he had tried to protect me even at the risk of his own safety. I hoped he was still alive. I hoped I would see him again. But I did not know. And uncertainty pressed against my chest like a heavy weight. I moved toward the tree line behind the neighborhood, staying low as I crossed the grass. Once I reached the edge of the woods, I disappeared into the shadows, letting the thick branches hide me. The cool earthy smell of the forest wrapped around me like a cloak. The path to Ridge Lane was long, but I knew it. I had walked it before. And now I had to walk it again, not for peace, not for nature, but for my life. With every step the trees closed around me like protectors, shielding me from the world outside. I kept moving through the quiet woods, gripping the note in my pocket and whispering silently to myself. I will make it. I will survive. And whoever did this will regret ever coming after me. The woods grew darker as I walked deeper beneath the canopy of tall trees, their long branches stretching over my head like protective arms, shielding me from the sky. The air felt cooler, the soil softer beneath my steps, and every sound around me carried a deeper echo. The rustle of leaves, the soft crack of a twig, the distant call of a bird, even my own breathing, all of it felt louder and sharper. Danger has a way of heightening every sense, and in that forest I felt everything. Every tiny shift in the wind, every shadow that moved, every whisper of sound behind me. I was alone, and yet I did not feel alone. I kept glancing back, half expecting to see someone slipping quietly through the trees behind me. But no one appeared. Still, the feeling of being watched clung to my skin like a cold mist. The trail to the cabin was not a straight one. It wound around thick tree trunks, dipped through shallow ravines, drifted near steep slopes, and then curved back into the dense brush. As I moved forward, I kept one hand near the rough bark of the trees, using them as guides in case the path vanished beneath fallen leaves or overgrown branches. I tried to steady my breathing, but tension wrapped itself around my chest like a tightening rope. Each step seemed to ask the same question over and over: will you survive this? And with every step I answered silently, yes, I will survive. The deeper I went, the more the sunlight faded. The forest grew dim with patches of shadow that looked like dark pools. I forced myself to stay alert. I thought about the man who had been inside my house, moving through my rooms with quiet confidence. I pictured his silhouette's shape, still and patient, standing outside my door. Whoever he was not working alone. My neighbor knew that. His note had made that painfully clear. Do not trust anyone. That warning replayed in my mind like an urgent chant. So I trusted no one. Not a sound, not a shadow, not a memory, only my instincts. After almost an hour of steady walking, I reached a small clearing where the trees opened just enough to let a soft pale light spill through. I stopped there and listened. The rustling of leaves felt different, more scattered, carried by a breeze that whispered through the branches like a voice too faint to understand. I could smell the damp earth stronger here, mixed with the scent of pine. The forest felt alive and ancient, and for a moment I felt strangely comforted by its presence. Nature might hide me, nature might protect me, but I knew it could not stop the danger following behind me. I stepped forward again and noticed something unusual. A shoe print, not mine, pressed lightly into the dirt just at the edge of the clearing. Fresh. The outline was clean. Too clean. My breath hitched. Someone else had come this way. Someone had walked toward the cabin. Or someone had walked away from it. Either way, it meant I was not the only one who knew about this path. I crouched beside the print, studying it carefully. The heel was deep, the toes shallow. That meant whoever it was had been moving quickly, not carefully. Perhaps running. Or perhaps in a hurry to reach something. Or someone. Fear tried to rise in me, but I pushed it down. I stood slowly, looked around, and kept moving. Every step felt heavier now. Every sound felt like a warning. My heartbeat pulsed through my ears, swelling and fading like a drum rolling through a long tunnel. I felt the urgency growing inside me. I needed to reach the cabin before the person with the shoe prints did. Or before the intruder found another way to cut me off. My neighbor had sent me there for a reason. He had trusted me to follow his warning. Now I needed to trust myself to stay alive long enough to reach the truth. The path sloped upward slightly and my legs burned as I climbed, but I refused to slow down. Branches brushed against my arms and shoulders as I pushed through thicker brush. My breath grew heavier and the forest air felt warmer with each minute that passed. The sky above was shifting from pale morning light to a deeper muted shade as clouds drifted in. I could feel the weight of the day pressing down around me. After another long stretch of walking, I finally saw the thin outline of the cabin through the trees. A small shape huddled between two massive pines, half hidden behind tangled vines and fallen branches. Relief washed over me, but only for a moment. Because as I drew closer I saw something that made my skin prickle with sharp fear. The cabin door was open. Not wide open but cracked. Just enough to suggest that someone had entered recently. Or someone had left in a hurry. My neighbor might be inside. The man who hunted me might be inside. Or someone entirely unknown to me might be waiting in the shadows. I stood frozen for a moment, letting the sight sink in. Then I stepped forward, slowly placing each foot carefully on the ground to avoid snapping twigs or crunching loose leaves. The clearing around the cabin was silent. Too silent. No birds. No insects. No wind. Silence held everything like a trapped breath. I approached the porch and felt the boards creak under my weight. The sound made me flinch and I held still for several seconds, listening for any movement inside. Nothing. I reached the door slowly and nudged it open just a few inches more. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. Inside the cabin the light was dim. Dust floated in the air, catching the faint streaks of light through the cracks in the boarded windows. The place smelled of old wood and stale air and something else. Something metallic. I stepped inside, my eyes adjusting slowly. The room was small. A wooden table, 2 chairs, an old stone fireplace with charred logs. Nothing seemed disturbed at first glance. Then I noticed the footprints. More of them, leading toward the back room. I followed them with cautious steps. The floor creaked softly under me, but I moved with as much care as I could. My breath shook with every exhale. When I reached the doorway of the back room I stopped. A shadow moved inside. A soft shifting sound. Someone was there. I pressed my back against the wall just outside the doorway and listened. The sound came again, a faint cough or maybe a strained breath. My neighbor. It had to be him. I took a deep breath and stepped inside quickly, ready for anything. And there he was, my neighbor, sitting on the floor, leaning against the wall, his face pale, his breathing uneven, his eyes wide with exhaustion and fear. A bruise marked the side of his forehead and his shirt was torn near the shoulder. Relief mixed with worry surged through me and I knelt beside him. He looked at me with a mixture of relief and desperation. He tried to speak but his voice cracked into a dry whisper. He reached for my hand, gripping my fingers with surprising strength for someone in his condition. He told me to close the door and I did, making sure it latched fully. When I returned to him he drew a shaky breath and finally spoke clearly enough for me to hear. "They know you are alive. They will not stop." His words hit me like a tidal wave and my body went cold. I asked him who they were and why they were after me, but he shook his head slowly and painfully. He said there was no time for the full truth. He said he had tried to protect me from the moment he learned what was planned. He said the break in the devices, the intruder, all of it had been set in motion days ago, maybe longer. He had been watching them, watching their movements, watching the danger circle closer to my house. He knew they would strike soon. That was why he sent the note. I felt the world tilt around me and yet I stayed still, trying to absorb every piece of what he told me. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone dangerous. Someone determined. And someone connected to my life in a way I had not yet understood. He looked at me again, his eyes dark with urgency. He said that once they realized I had escaped they would widen their search. He said they were already tracking him and that he had only barely made it to the cabin before they caught up. He said they would return. Maybe soon. His breathing grew weaker as he spoke and fear tightened inside me like a vice. I wanted to help him. I wanted to carry him out to safety. But he told me not to waste time. He told me there was something I needed to see, something hidden under the floorboards near the fireplace. Something he had taken from the people who were hunting me. Something they wanted back at any cost. Something that explained why my life had suddenly become a target. I stood slowly and looked toward the fireplace, feeling that ominous weight settle deep in my chest. Whatever was hidden there would change everything. And I could feel it. I could feel the truth waiting in the dark behind the smoke-stained stones and the dusty wooden boards. My neighbor held my hand one more time with fading strength. He told me to be brave. He told me to move fast. He told me that survival would depend on what I did next. And then his hand slipped from mine and he slowly closed his eyes, sinking back against the wall with a soft exhale that made the whole cabin feel unbearably still. I stood there in the silence, my heart breaking but my resolve tightening like steel. I turned toward the fireplace, walked slowly and knelt beside it. I knew what I had to do. I had to uncover the truth. I had to find out why they wanted me gone. And I had to survive long enough to fight back. Whatever was hidden beneath those floorboards would lead me to the answer. And I was finally ready to face it.